The cold hum of alien engines echoed through the metallic corridors of the Zerethi warship Virith's Whisper, as Callan Rourke sat chained to a curved black chair, his wrists bound by glowing bands of violet light. The room was silent, too silent for comfort, and the walls pulsed faintly like a living creature, as if the ship itself were watching him. He didn't know how long he had been a prisoner. Days, maybe weeks, since his recon ship was torn apart by an invisible net of psychic force near the Zerethi border. The first time he had seen them, they were beautiful and terrifying, tall, silver-skinned, with glowing marks that floated over their foreheads like moving stars. He expected pain, interrogation, maybe a slow death, but instead they had brought him here alone, unhurt and confused. Today felt different. He sensed movement beyond the shimmering force field at the door. Then it opened without sound, and she entered. Unlike the guards, she moved like someone used to being obeyed. Her long, dark purple robe shimmered like oil, and her hair silver as starlight. Her eyes were striking, not cold, not cruel, but searching. She was Zerethi, but not fully. Something about her was softer. Human, maybe. Hybrid, probably. She stopped a few feet away and tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle she intended to solve. "I am Lady Syrixa of the emissary class," she said, her voice smooth but unnervingly calm. "You are not here for pain. You are here for truth." Callan didn't respond. He had dealt with enemy diplomats before. They often smiled while holding a dagger behind their backs. "You resist psychic touch," she continued. "Unusual. Rare. Frustrating." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Humans feel deeply, yet your thoughts are sealed like armor. I want to know why." He gave her a crooked smile, amused by her frustration. "Maybe it's just practice," he said. "Maybe I just don't like people poking around in my head." She didn't laugh, but her lip twitched, like the idea amused her more than she wanted to admit. She walked in a slow circle around him, as if observing an artifact. "We have broken armies with a whisper," she said. "We have crushed rebellion with thought alone. But you, human, you sit here, smiling, and I cannot find the root of your calm." Callan shrugged slightly. "Maybe because I'm not afraid of you." That made her stop. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she leaned down, her face now inches from his. "Say it, human, do you love me?" The words were so sudden, so out of place, that Callan blinked in disbelief. He almost laughed, but something in her tone stopped him. She wasn't mocking. She was asking. Genuinely. Curiously. Like someone who had studied every language in the galaxy and still didn't understand the word love. His reply came slow, measured. "You're not ready for my answer." And that was the truth. Syrixa straightened, her face unreadable. But her eyes betrayed something: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Not of him, but of what his answer might mean. She turned sharply and walked away without a word, the force field hissing back into place behind her. Callan was left alone in the glowing silence, more confused than ever. But outside the cell, Syrixa leaned against the smooth wall, breathing harder than she should have. Her mind, trained to filter thought and command will, felt shaken. The human's emotions hadn't bent to her like others. They had pushed back. And worse, they had pulled something from within her, something old, buried, unwanted. Emotion. Curiosity. A hunger to understand something the Zerethi had never been able to create in a lab or breed into their hybrids. She didn't just want answers now, she needed them. Somewhere deep in the warship, the engine shifted course toward the Zerethi core world. The countdown to judgment had begun. But neither Syrixa nor Callan knew that what started as a conversation would soon become a spark that might set fire to the stars. The journey to the Zerethi core world passed in silence, but not in stillness. Deep inside the warship Virith's Whisper, Syrixa stood alone in her chamber, facing a tall pillar of light, an ancient Zerethi memory construct. The energy swirled like a storm trapped in glass, filled with the thoughts of her ancestors, generations of rulers, warriors, and philosophers who had shaped the cold brilliance of their empire. She had always trusted the voices of the past, But now, one voice echoed louder than all others, the humans. "You're not ready for my answer." It wasn't defiance that haunted her. It was the certainty in his tone, the strange kindness behind his refusal. She had accessed thousands of human minds before soldiers, scientists, even poets and all had eventually bent to her psychic skill. But Callan's thoughts were like a maze with no center. She could feel the shape of his memories, but not their meaning. No fear. No surrender. Only a steady fire of will. And something else. Something she had no word for. In the days that followed, Syrixa launched a quiet project, hidden from the ship's command note. She called it the Heart Logic Trial, an experiment forbidden by the HFY High Council. Using fragments of psychic recordings and emotional responses from previous interrogations, she began building a simulation of human emotional structure, hoping to decode the pattern that made Callan different. She believed that if she could isolate the logic behind human love, she could control it, understand it the same way her kind had once broken the laws of matter and mind. But what she didn't expect was for the simulation to start changing her. Each time she viewed the emotional pulses, the sorrow of loss, the ache of longing, the quiet peace of connection, something inside her mind twisted in unfamiliar ways. She began dreaming, something Zarethi hybrids were not meant to do. She saw flashes of Earth's sky, of music, of hands reaching not for power, but for comfort. She would wake with tears, another human trait she never experienced before Callan entered her world. Meanwhile, in his cell, Callan noticed the shift. The guards were more distant. The routines had changed. The ship felt like it was holding its breath. And then, one evening, Syrixa returned not in full regalia, but in a simpler robe, her hair loose, her face softer, yet harder to read. She dismissed the guards and entered the cell alone. Callan raised an eyebrow. "No chains? You sure that's wise?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she sat across from him, folding her legs like a human would. "You said I wasn't ready for your answer," she said. "I want to know what I need to be ready." Callan leaned back. "It's not a math equation," he said. "It's not something you can dissect." She frowned, not in anger but in thought. "You speak as if love is a decision." He nodded. "It is. Not just a feeling. It's what you do, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Syrixa absorbed this, her mind racing with contradictions. "Then explain why pain and loss are part of it." Callan looked her in the eye. "Because you can't love something without risking losing it. The value comes from that risk. Without it, it's just control." That struck her like a psychic blow. The Zirithi believed in absolute control of matter, of energy, of thought. But this human emotion, it thrived in chaos, in uncertainty. And yet it created strength, unity, sacrifice, things her kind had never truly mastered. She stood slowly, then turned back to him. "You are not like the others." He shrugged. "I'd say the same about you." She paused at the door, then looked over her shoulder. "I see now. I don't want to conquer your thoughts. I want to understand why they move me." And with that, she left him in the dark once more, but this time, the silence between them felt different. Not empty. Waiting. An automated alert from the High Council. The Sea-Null Storm, a powerful psychic weapon designed to erase resistance in 12 human colonies, was being prepared. Syrixa was to return to lead the activation, her hybrid mind perfectly suited to anchor the device. She read the order with growing dread. The same energy she had once been proud to control now felt monstrous. She realized the Council still saw her as a tool, not a person. Not like Callan did. Not like she wanted to be. Back in her private lab, the Heart Logic trial began showing side effects, glitches in the psychic field, emotional contamination warnings. The ship's AI flagged her behavior as unstable, but she ignored it. Because now, the virus wasn't in Callan, it was in her. The human virus of choice, of feeling, of freedom. And it was spreading. The deeper Syrixa sank into her thoughts, the more the Zarethi world around her began to crumble beneath its polished surface. In the grand corridors of Virith's Whisper, everything still glowed with order, gleaming floors, whispering energy veins in the walls, silent guards who obeyed without blinking, but inside her, that order was slipping. The heart logic trial, once her secret tool, had become a mirror she could no longer look away from. Every session pulled her further from the cold certainty of her training. Her thoughts, once clean and methodical, now tangled with memories that weren't hers. Children laughing under a blue sky, a hand brushing another not out of command, but connection. She had never been to Earth, but it haunted her now, as if something inside her longed to belong to it. The ship's AI began reporting. Irregularities, mild at first, then dangerous. Emotional resonance fields flaring in her quarters. Psychic stability dropping. She was ordered to undergo recalibration, but Syrixa hesitated. Recalibration meant forgetting Callan. It meant returning to the flawless shell of a being the Empire demanded. That thought filled her with something sharp and new fear. Real fear. She disabled the AI monitoring systems and lied to her superiors. For the first time in her life, Syrixa chose disobedience. Below deck, Callan sat quietly in his cell, but his instincts told him everything was changing. The guards avoided looking at him. Power fluctuations flickered in the force field. And when Syrixa returned, she didn't carry a tablet or speak in riddles, she simply stood before him, unsure, as if searching for the right shape to become. "I'm supposed to lead the storm," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A psychic wave strong enough to flatten 12 human colonies. "They chose me because I'm stable." Callan stood up slowly, narrowing his eyes. "But you're not anymore, are you?" She shook her head. "I don't know who I am now." He stepped closer to the edge of the force field. "Then become who you want to be, not what they built you for." She stared at him, emotions she didn't have names for flashing across her face. "If I stop the weapon, the Council will hunt me. I will be erased." Callan tilted his head, watching her carefully. "You came to me asking about love," he said. "This is what it means. To choose someone else's safety over your own. To stand in front of the fire instead of behind it." The silence after his words was so thick it felt like gravity. Syrixa reached forward, and this time, she shut down the force field. The barrier shimmered, cracked like glass, and vanished. Callan stepped through it. Not as a prisoner. As something else. Something undefined. She didn't stop him. She just said, "Help me." And with that, two figures, one born of war, one born of resistance, walked side by side into the heart of a ship designed to never allow doubt. But doubt had already taken root, and behind every wall, every screen, every whisper of psychic code, something was beginning to unravel. A fracture had formed in the perfect Zarethi order, and at its center stood a human and a hybrid, no longer playing their assigned roles. And somewhere deep within the ship, the core of the Psi-Null storm hummed louder, waiting for activation or destruction. The glowing corridors of Virith's whisper no longer felt like a prison to Callan, they felt like the inside of a ticking bomb. He moved through them beside Syrixa, both of them half shielded by her command access, half blind to how much time they truly had. Every step brought them closer to the Psi-Null core chamber, the heart of a weapon capable of silencing millions of human minds in seconds. Syrixa's clearance allowed them past security layers. But even that wouldn't last. Already, the ship's internal systems were detecting anomalies, her growing emotional instability, unauthorized access points, and worst of all, the trace emotional signature of Callan himself. The ship was starting to resist her. Lights flickered when she passed, and psychic panels glitched under her touch. The AI whispered warnings of rebellion. But she didn't stop. Not now. Somewhere along the way, she had shed the name Lady Syrixa like an old skin. Now, she was just Syrixa, the woman standing between two civilizations, trying to stop a massacre she had once been honored to lead. Callan kept close, silent, watching her movements with a strange kind of trust. She had power, yes, but now he saw the weight of it pressing down on her, not lifting her up. When they reached the final door, a crystalline wall guarding the Psi-Null core, Syrixa hesitated. "Once we shut this down," she said quietly, "there's no going back. I'll be marked as a traitor." They'll hunt us forever. Callan placed a hand on the wall beside her, the cold surface humming under his palm. You already crossed the line the moment you asked if I loved you, he said, voice calm. This is just finishing the answer. She looked at him, emotion flickering across her sharp, glowing eyes. Do you still mean it? Even now? He gave a slight, tired smile. Especially now. The wall responded to her touch, shattering into translucent shards that vanished before hitting the ground. Inside, the core pulsed a swirling mass of psychic energy caged in crystal and thought. Together, they entered, and Syrixa began the shutdown sequence. But the ship reacted violently, alarms screamed, lights flared red, and the voice of the council itself echoed through the chamber, demanding obedience, threatening mental purging. Syrixa trembled as the voice of her creators flooded her mind, trying to force her back into submission. Her knees buckled, eyes glowing with pain. Callan caught her before she fell. Fight it, he whispered. Not for me. For you. With a cry that shattered the silence, Syrixa severed the link to the council and overrode the core with a single raw psychic surge, something never done before. The energy collapsed in on itself, harmless, silent, defused. The sea null storm died. And in that moment, across the ship, systems began to fail. Sirens howled. Security locks disengaged. The ship no longer recognized Syrixa as a commander. She was now something worse than an enemy, a rogue. Callan helped her up as the room began to shake. We have to move, he said. Where? She asked. Anywhere they can't reach. They sprinted through failing corridors, alarms blaring, power systems collapsing in waves. Syrixa used the last of her command codes to activate an emergency escape module. It wouldn't take them far, but it would take them away. As the pod launched into the dark void between stars, Syrixa looked back at the shrinking warship, her home, her prison now burning from within. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But when Callan took her hand, she didn't let go. For the first time in her life, she had chosen her own path. Not the one she was bred for. The one she believed in. The escape pod drifted like a lost thought through the void, small and silent, shielded only by a layer of stolen codes and failing stealth tech. Inside, Syrixa sat beside Callan in a silence that said more than words. The stars outside looked colder now, more distant than ever, and yet neither of them felt truly alone. Syrixa had once been part of something vast, something precise, a living system of rules, minds, and power, but she had stepped away from it all for something messier, riskier, and undeniably human. Callan patched into the pod's systems, trying to find a safe haven, but even the long-range signals were weak. The Zurithi were already hunting. Across space, their war networks lit up like a storm, a furious empire seeking the traitor who had broken their perfect weapon. Syrixa leaned her head back against the cool metal wall, breathing in deep, steadying herself. There's no going back, she said, and it wasn't a question. No, Callan replied, watching her closely. But we're not going alone. He activated a transmitter, one encoded with a burst key from his old recon unit. A message would reach human command soon. Not just a warning about the sea null weapon, but a story of her. Of them. Of what had changed. On Earth, the tale would spark whispers in war rooms and inspire soldiers who had lost hope. But on Zurithi-controlled worlds, it would spread like a virus, the tale of a hybrid who turned against the code, who chose love over control, who walked away from perfection to chase something real. It wasn't a battle. It was something stronger, a fracture in belief. The council would try to cover it up, to erase the names, but it was too late. The whisper had begun. In backwater colonies and crowded starships, people would speak of her not as a traitor, but as a sign that the Zurithi weren't invincible, that even inside the heart of their empire, something had cracked. In the pod, the silence stretched again, warm this time. Syrixa looked over at Callan and asked softly, "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" He gave her a sideways glance and said, "You don't need everyone to forgive you. Just enough people to help you build something better." She closed her eyes, letting the weight of the moment settle in. The stars outside kept moving, and as the escape pod sailed into the dark, guided by a quiet beacon of hope, two souls, one human, one hybrid, held on to each other in defiance of everything they had been taught. No weapons, no war cries, just a whisper. But sometimes, a whisper is all it takes to shake an empire.